I'd like to call to order the City of Maricopa Planning and Zoning Commission meeting of Monday, April 27th. We'll start with the invocation by Commissioner Yoakum and the Pledge of Allegiance led by new Commissioner Rowe.
Please rise as able. Dear Lord, we gather here tonight intent on doing good work. We seek to represent fairly and well those who have given us this task. Please look down and bless us and our soldiers who protect us every day. May our efforts be blessed with insight, guided by understanding and wisdom we seek to serve with respect to all. May our personal faith give us strength to act faithfully and well in all of the matters before us. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. I'm sorry.
And we'll start out with a roll call.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Yoakum.
Here.
Commissioner Whittle.
Present.
Commissioner Thomas.
Present.
Commissioner Robertson.
Here.
Commissioner Brems. Chairman Klob.
Here.
And I'd like to welcome our new commissioner, Mr. Rob Rowe. Are you present this evening?
Present.
Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Very good. Thank you. At this point, we'll go to call the public. If you wish to speak, please complete a speaker card and submit to the chairman prior to the start of the meeting. The procedures to follow if you address the commission are: commission requests that you express your ideas in 3 minutes or less and refrain from any personal attacks or derogatory statements about any city employee, a fellow citizen, or anyone else, whether in the audience or not. The chairman will limit discussion whenever he deems such an action as appropriate to the proper conduct of the meeting. Anybody like to speak in call to the public? Very good. Seeing none, I'll close the call to the public, and we'll go to the minutes. I need a motion to approve the minutes from March 23rd, 2026. And for the record, I will be abstaining from the vote. I did not attend that meeting.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item passes. That's going to take us to GPA 26-01, public hearing, major general plan amendment, GPA 26-01, advancing Maricopa 2026 general plan update. The Planning and Zoning Commission shall discuss and take action on the state-mandated Advancing Maricopa 2026 General Plan Update for discussion and action.
Good evening, Chairman, members of the Commission. Tonight we have our second meeting of the 2 required state-mandated meetings for the General Plan Update. Our consultant is going to take you through this process tonight and give you an update as to where we are currently in this. It's been an ongoing process. It's been just about 18 months in the making now. As you may recall, Council adopted the public participation plan back in early December of 2024. So we're working our way through this. So we're excited for a couple of things. A, that we're to this meeting this evening. It's been an arduous task with all the community outreach that we've done. It's exciting to see the folks in the audience tonight. I thought I was at a commission or a council meeting there for a second. So this is really great because this plan is all based on public participation and reaching out to the community because this is their plan moving forward. So I'm not going to go too far into the details because I know Matthew's going to touch on quite a few of those as we work through this. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Matthew with Michael Baker International, and we're going to take you through the plan.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Chair and fellow commissioners. It's great to be back before you to hopefully put a little bow on our general plan discussion that Rick mentioned we've been working and focusing on for the last 18 months. So tonight is the second public hearing. As Rick mentioned, state statute does require that the general plan go through 2 public hearings with the Planning Commission. After the second public hearing, that is where we make a formal recommendation to council. Then council makes a decision on finally putting the plan or taking the plan to the public for voter ratification. And so we'll talk a little bit about what that looks like and means as part of this. For any of those in the audience that joined us for the first or previous public hearing meeting, you're going to see some familiar slides. We walked through a good portion of this presentation in that last meeting, but given that we have some new audience members and the ultimate notion that there will be a recommendation through tonight's meeting, I want to give the benefit to everyone to see the full presentation and the work that has gone into this plan. So Advancing Maricopa General Plan for 2026 is a state-mandated plan. Every city and town in Arizona is required to have a general plan. Those plans are required to be updated every 10 years. And so the current general plan that the city has was last updated 10 years ago. And so here we are at that moment in time to go through that review and update process. The general plan is just as it's titled. It's intended to be a general guiding document. It's a policy document. It is not an ordinance. It is not law like a zoning code or some other specifics that the town utilizes to guide near-term development. It is a document that establishes a roadmap, a direction, a vision, and then that's usually captured in the general plan through a series of goals and policies. Those goals and policies are intended to be broad statements to, again, give a North Star, a direction to the city, but also give flexibility to the city over the next 10 years to have ability to respond to outside influences or other conditions that we may not be aware of as we stand here today. So that general plan is really intended to be that document that gives us time to look out 10, 20 years into the future, but not paint ourselves into a corner that we can't make adjustments so that our short-term decisions are in alignment with our long-term community vision. And so that's where this general plan comes together, is it gives us that time where we can look down the road and make sure we're headed in the direction we want, but it doesn't force us to make immediate decisions about how we're going to do that, because there's efforts within City Hall every day that are balancing those items, and all those things need to be taken into consideration as the city goes through its duties in terms of meeting the needs of residents. So with that baseline of why or what goes into a general plan, let's also talk about what are the components or elements of a general plan. Based on the size of your city or town, a general plan must address specific topics. Those topics within state law are referred to as elements. And the right-hand side of the screen here lists all the elements that are required to be included in the general plan for a city the size of Maricopa. What's great about the city is in your prior general plan update effort, or the plan that is in place today, they had foresight when they were going through that update process and said Maricopa's growing, and so they went above and beyond state requirements and listed all of these all these elements, I should say, in your current general plan. So even when they weren't required last update cycle, the city went ahead and included those. And so this update cycle, we were able to get in and just refresh those instead of crafting things from scratch. So I think there was some great synergy to build on from that. So the general plan does address all the required elements, but there's also the ability for every city and town to identify elective elements that they may think or term as just as important to the quality of life within that specific community. And in this case, Maricopa had previously identified economic development and arts and culture as additional topics or elements that were critical to the city. And we carried those forward in this update as well. And so all of these items are addressed or touched on in this general plan. Now, how do we go about updating a general plan? And so this graphic kind of shows how we break this process, or how we broke this process out into 3 primary phases. The first phase, our recognized phase, we started way back in September of 2024. That's where we get existing condition background information. That content looks at census data, it looks at regional data or state data, and complements the background information that we collect from residents so that we can get that baseline assessment report. And that is used to then influence some of the writing that occurs in the next phase, the enrich phase. So with the benefit of gaining background information, we're then in a position, once we get into that enrich phase, to actually craft sections or chapters of the plan. And we go through that chapter by chapter. And then once we get through all of those and have a complete document, we put it out for a 60-day review process, that 2-month period that is required by state law. And state law says we must share that with the public, we must share it with adjacent cities and towns, with state agencies and county representatives. So that goes out for 2 months for everybody to look at and to give comments on. And then we're able to revise the plan and move into the achieve phase, which we're in now, as you can see from the little orange triangle there, that once we have the benefit of comments from that 60-day review period, we make adjustments to the plan and then go through the adoption process that requires 2 public hearings with the Planning Commission, and then once we get a recommendation from the Planning Commission, we go to Council for a final decision on the general plan. Once Council approves the plan, then that puts it on the ballot for voter ratification. Now, state law requires that the general plan must be voted on by the public. And so that makes this a very unique plan compared to other documents that the city utilizes. This is the only document that goes out to the public for voter approval. And so in order to get it on that November 2026 ballot, we must have the plan adopted by council at least 120 days before that election. So the thing I like to emphasize in this slide is, yes, the phases, but there's 2 things. One, that a lot of this time frame, why did this project take so long, is because we're balancing that 60-day review process and those 120 days that statute says we must account for. So there's a lot of downtime that the plan doesn't get touched within that overall time frame. The other key point is why you see engagement intertwined throughout all these phases, because ultimately this plan, because it goes to the public, engagement was a cornerstone of this process throughout the update effort. This is one that listened to residents' feedback and then incorporated that into the draft documents that we'll be discussing this evening. So let's talk a little bit about public engagement, because it was such a large component. This slide really distills, again, 18 months worth of outreach into one specific slide. But I think it does capture how robust the outreach effort was in terms of getting feedback from the public. Yes, we did have 3 traditional community workshops. Those were held at the library and allowed, you can see some of the pictures there, it allowed residents to participate in a more traditional setting and come to hear presentations in person. But we also did provide that information on the project website. So if someone wasn't able to join those community workshops, they could see the presentation boards and provide feedback through our project website. We use press releases and news articles to get information out about availability of drafts or availability of upcoming meetings. We piggybacked community events, right? We don't necessarily always want to ask people to come to us. We want to go to them. And the city has some great community events that we piled onto in order to try to get out to residents that may not be able to join us in a meeting during the week, day, or evening like tonight. We also conducted many surveys throughout the drafting process and collected over 700 responses in those surveys. Maricopa is a growing community, and so 700 surveys might not sound like a large number in relation to the population of the city, but we do general plan updates for large and small communities across the state. And it's challenging to get participation on surveys with all of the other competing demands that everyone has in their daily lives, as well as just requests from a city the size of Maricopa about all the other things that are going on and surveys for other activities and events. So we always would love to have more participation, but this 700 is a very strong number in terms of we see communities twice the size of Maricopa with half the number of participants that we had for this update effort. We received over 2,000 individual comments. So of all the surveys or all the comment that we received in our community workshops, we collected over 2,000 responses through that 60-day review period and other opportunities. So as I mentioned, that 60-day review period by itself collected 228 comments, and we had 56 comments from external agencies. So while we're balancing comments from the public, we are also managing comments from other state agencies or communities that may have provided us feedback on how we can strengthen the document or make it more consistent or align with outside efforts that, again, if we can get the general plan to be in alignment with other efforts by stakeholders or partner agencies, you know, it just makes the document that much more robust. And so that was great to see that we not only got comments from the public, but those agencies also stepped in and gave us some good feedback. Throughout all of this, we would love to get to the public as much as we can, but it's not possible to get to the public and engage with them as much as we often need to round out a general plan like this. And so we did put together a general plan advisory committee. That committee was fantastic. They met over 5 meetings in a year's time frame. And if we really combine the amount of hours of just meeting time, that was over 200 volunteer hours. That doesn't even include each individual's time spent on their own reviewing draft material, crafting optional language. And so that advisory group, which was comprised of a cross-section of residents and business owners and representatives of agencies that operate within the city, all of those participants were used as a sounding board that we could take ideas to that were shared through that 60-day review or that were inputted to us through some of our public events, and we could take those ideas and bring them to the advisory committee and explore how we might incorporate them or how we might align them with other feedback so that we're addressing the community overall and not leaving anyone behind, but also recognizing that we need to balance everybody's input and leave opportunity for the city to navigate decisions as the community moves forward in the short term. So out of all that outreach, all of those advisory committee meetings, what was the primary feedback we got? And this slide summarizes, in a very succinct way, what were the driving comments that residents shared with us the most. And so you can see that implementing transportation solutions was, of course, very front and center with residents, but also looking at career advancing employment options, trying to expand employment opportunities in the city so that even some of those trips that create some of those transportation challenges might be more internal than external, taking trips off roadways and then helping with congestion even while it's helping with career advancement opportunities in the city. It's even helping to address some other comments that residents shared. Expand local health care options and services. That was one area that a lot of residents expressed a desire that they drive longer distances for specialty care services, and it would be great if the city could start getting more special care type of services within the city so that, again, Maricopa could function as a complete community and not have to rely on going to external trips to get some of the daily needs that residents have. Develop wide-ranging housing and retail opportunities. So we heard comments about certainly affordability or concerns about growth from a housing standpoint, but we also heard desire for larger lot residential and opportunities for young families on top of retirees. So really it was looking at a spectrum of housing options within the community and making sure that there's a place for all different types of housing, but we need retail opportunities to complement that residents don't want just a bedroom community. They want opportunities for entertainment and recreation along with retail. So you can see, hopefully, that while these summarize all of those comments that we received in a very succinct way, hopefully for those in the audience, they see that these primary topics touch on some of the areas that you might be thinking of in your feedback that you shared throughout this process. So when we incorporated that feedback, we obviously had to balance that out in several different ways. And one of them is while we looked at the content of the plan, we also looked at how the plan is organized and structured. And so what you see here is on the left-hand side is the current Planning Maricopa, Shaping Our Community general plan. And that plan, you can see, had over 83 individual goals, 363 policies, and 16 implementable strategies. And as we discussed this update effort, it really was front and center that we wanted to try and get the plan to have more succinct goals that could be more user-friendly in terms of championing those and not having such a wide variety of goals that it would be hard to accomplish. And so we tried to, as you can see, take goals and focus them into more succinct complementary efforts. So we revised the plan to take 83 individual goals and refine them into 44 more defined individual goals, but then complement those with 242 policies rather than the 363 we had before. And that's really a function of taking some policies out that didn't apply, and then making sure that we didn't have unnecessary redundancy. In the current plan, there's a lot of siloed chapters that have policies or goals that are repeated from one chapter to the next. And there's really no need for that. And so we took a lot of that redundancy out, which then made the plan more succinct, which we feel makes it more user-friendly and allows it to be implementable. But to help with that implementation, we also expanded the action strategies, if you will. So where we had 16, we kind of built on that. We took anything that had been accomplished out of the action strategies and then supplemented that with additional recommendations about not only elaborating on the goals and policies that the plan outlines, but specifically outlining efforts that the city can move forward today to start achieving some of those goals and policies that are outlined within the plan. So while that talks a little bit about the structure of the plan, what this slide shows is how the plan is organized. So you can see that we have 6 primary chapters. Those chapters touch on some of the broad topical areas that the plan must address. But then within those topical or chapters, you see the subheadings of all those elements or topic areas that had to be addressed per state statute. So rather than all of those topic areas being individual chapters of the plan, we nested them into common themes, if you will, and then that's how we were able to get complementary goals and policies in the plan to make it a more user-friendly document, but to still meet state statute. So with the organization of the plan, this is certainly not meant to be an eye test. This has a matrix that shows all of the goals that are listed by chapter in the general plan. So for those in the audience that can't necessarily read all of this, the takeaway we want to show, though, is that the column on the left-hand side that has the color on it, that indicates what chapter that goal is identified in. Then we have a goal statement, and then all of the rows or columns at the top are all the individual elements or topics that state statute says we must address. And so in this plan, in order to show how certain goals cross-pollinate, we listed all of those elements or topic areas and then showed how a specific goal actually does address those different elements. And so goal 1 doesn't just address land use, but it has impact on growth areas and housing and circulation. And so this is a really neat addition to this plan to help show how one goal isn't just placed into this document to serve one purpose. It's actually helping to achieve multiple complementary efforts. And you can see this takes us through all of the different chapters of the plan, and so how in each chapter, any particular goal does not have one objective. It has many objectives that it's trying to balance in order to ensure that the city is moving forward in a way that can be most efficient, but cover the most ground as well. And then the last thing that I'd like to emphasize is that implementation aspect. The general plan, as I mentioned, is that broad vision document that directs the city in terms of the direction that we want to go over the next 10 or 20 years. But often when you go through that process, we start to get ideas about how we can take an idea forward, a policy or a goal. And that's fantastic. That means we're actually starting to think about using the plan to move the needle. But what I would like to emphasize is that a lot of that detail comes out in implementing the general plan, and that that's where this action document can really start to identify how these broad goals and policies will actually move together. So someone might read a goal or a policy and say, that's very general. I'd like to see more detail. But that detail is usually what happens in the next step in terms of taking some policy language and then moving forward and updating the zoning code in order to create a law that then the city can implement that idea. And so I would just want to emphasize that this table was scrutinized in order to start identifying some of those implementation efforts to try and actually take this plan forward. So with that, I'll just now use a few minutes to round out some of the key aspects of the primary sections of the plan and the efforts that were taken to update those above and beyond just the goals and policies. So one of those examples of that would be the land use plan itself. So the land use plan is a map that is synonymous with the general plan in terms of not only do we have goals and policies that we adhere to, but this land use plan identifies the broad types of development that occurs across the city and where that development should be considered. Now, the thing to keep in mind that is unique about other documents for the city is that the municipal limits of the city are all in the northeast part of this map, north of the Ak-Chin Indian community. That is the municipal limits of the city today. But what the general plan also must address is the planning boundary, or the area that the city may annex to in its future growth. So that larger boundary that you see there is the entire planning area, or what Maricopa may grow to if it continues to annex land further south of the Ak-Chin Indian community. So this map shows not only how plans were considered within the current municipal limits, but also within the broader planning area that actually is under control and guidance of Pinell County. So within this effort, we went through past documents and decision-making and made sure that we updated land use types to be consistent with any recent decisions by the council. And then we also went into the county's comprehensive plan that looks at some of the land uses in the broader county area to understand if there was changes that needed to occur there. And so we made adjustments to land uses as well as roadway alignments through this process. And we also went through this with the advisory committee and took their feedback to incorporate some of those adjustments as well. In terms of growth areas, the thing I would like to emphasize on growth areas is I think the public often sees that and interprets it that a community is advocating for growth. And that's really not the case. State law requires a general plan to consider growth. And that's really what this general plan is doing. It's not saying that we're advocating for growth areas. We're just identifying that there are growth pressures in the city of Maricopa, outside influences, whether that be the need for a specific type of development because of what development has occurred to this point, or an outside influence proposing a specific type of development. And so in this graphic, we just went ahead and identified the different types of growth areas and pressures that the city is experiencing and where those occur. So you can see that there's certain pockets of the municipal limits of the city that are experiencing more residential growth pressures compared to other areas that might have employment growth areas or mixed-use conditions. Now, transportation, of course, is a very prominent topic within residents and was a topic that was mentioned frequently through this update effort. Right now, the city is going through preparing a transportation master plan. And so this document, this general plan, is trying to recognize that that transportation master plan is under development and is going to make further recommendations and more specific recommendations. So we identified a transportation plan that is consistent with the current recommendations of that master plan, but we also want to make sure that we leave flexibility for that plan to make further modifications as needed. So this particular map simply identifies the functional classifications or types of roadways, and then more specifically even identifies some of those external routes that the city is looking at as alternative alignments for additional access to I-10 or outside the municipal planning area. And so I think from that aspect, this plan is not only looking at internal circulation, but external circulation, with the recognition that the master plan will then refine in more detail what those specific alignments will entail, how they'll be phased, and additional components of what might go into their cross sections and other conditions. Housing, as I mentioned, was another topic that came up, and so this is an example of, we don't have a, other than the land use plan, we don't have a specific map, but this is an example of what I was mentioning about a mixture of housing types that can make sure that we meet the whole range of demographics that exist within the city. And so you can see here a goal and policy statement that speaks to that need of not only one specific housing type, but a broad cross-section. Expanding local business and economic development was another topic area that residents mentioned frequently. Of course, we have a lot of rooftops that have happened within the city, and so everyone believes that, hey, we are a home to many now, but now we need the services and the amenities to go along with that. And so here is a recognition of some of the broader goal statements, and then each of these have policies associated with them that speaks to that notion about even education and how that's important to helping with expanding business opportunities. But then we also have just how we're looking at expanding employment opportunities and our labor profile across the city overall. Parks and Recreation is something that all residents are very keen on, and so this planning effort went ahead and updated a lot of the trails and identification for Parks and Recreation existing and proposed. So this shows a mixture of that. And then we went ahead and rounded that out, right, with the larger planning area. So with that, I'll just say that the next steps for everyone's benefit is that with the recommendation from Planning Commission this evening on the current time frame, this process would then move forward to City Council for a work session on Tuesday, May 19th. Following that work session, we then would go to a council public hearing for final consideration. And if council were to approve the plan at that June 2nd hearing, then we would be in position to make that November 3rd general election. And so that's really the time frame and some of the particulars about the timing of this process. In order to maintain that 120 days, we have a little window, right, that we have to get this plan approved by council in order to make that November date. But with that, Chair, I'll turn it over to you for any questions from the commission or the public at large.
Very good. Thank you, Matt, for your presentation. Any questions for the presenter?
Hello, Matt. That was a mouthful.
Sorry, yes.
And Thank you for your this second presentation. And I've often said that you can tell if someone's telling the truth if their story changes or not. And your story did not change much, so thank you for that. The one thing that I was curious about was I noticed on one of the slides it had about 17, all the categories at the top. It looks like the state had about 17 recommendations that the general plan kind of stuck with. Yeah, you can keep going back. Right there. And you said 10 years ago that this community or the general plan kind of reached forward and did a little bit more than was required. These 17 categories up top, is that what every community deals with the recommendations of the state when it's coming up with a general plan?
So, great point of clarification. These topical areas are the exact terminology that state statute utilizes. Okay. So statute will list, and this is the maximum number of elements that a plan must include. But based on your size of your community, some communities, if they're less than basically 2,500 people, they only need 2 of these, land use and transportation. And then from there, you have 7 of these elements that you must address, and that's where the city was during your last general plan update processes. You really only needed to address 7 elements, but the city went ahead and addressed all of them. So we went ahead and maintained that because now that the community has grown, we need to address all of these topical areas.
Okay. Chair, I have another question. And then at the end, you spoke of the timeline, and you shared the timeline with us on a number of occasions. And nothing works out perfect, and you've been very distinct in what it would take to get it to a vote point. I'm curious to what would derail that, or what would be an issue if here tonight it doesn't get voted to pass, God forbid that happens, but in council or the public has an issue with 1 or 2 things that has to go back to the table and be discussed. What would be the next step for us to get this to the public to vote on? Not that I'm recommending that,
Sure.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, and that's, I think, a very practical, right, item to consider. We have a couple options in front of us if that were to happen through our conversation this evening. I would say that based on the timing, it would be very favorable to maintain our current schedule. So that would be the first thing that I would offer, is that we would want to try and push ourselves to arrive at a decision this evening, because if we were to delay that, that would have a ripple effect to getting in front of council, which then would start getting into that 120-day time frame before that November election. Now, that said, there's a couple things that could be considered there, and it's up to the commission as in terms of what you're most comfortable with. But at the end of the day, we have to bring forward to council whatever the commission makes a decision on. So that's the key thing, I think, for all of us to take away this evening, is that if we hear this evening that there might be language of particular goal that we want to adjust, we need to know the language of that goal tonight because we can't, with the direction of the commission this evening, the commission can't say, well, we want to recommend approval, but maybe just go adjust goal 1, revise it a little bit before you take it to council. Well, we can't leave that open-ended for us to just make up some language and hope that it was in alignment with what your expectations are. In order to, bring forward to council what the commission intended, we have to have the language. And so if there's any decision that we're going to adjust language, we would want to craft that language this evening, or make a statement that says, we approve this plan as provided, However, we would like to make a recommendation to council at their work session that they discuss this topic, and this topic. And you might advise council of some areas that think they need to be further discussed with them. And that could be an option, that we take the plan forward, but revisit some topics so that council can address those in their work session.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions on this side? Commissioner Robertson.
Thank you, Matt. Great presentation. A lot of familiar points that we've seen. Picking up where we left off there, let's suppose we get to November and it's on the ballot and it fails. What's the course of action then? What happens then?
So state law considers that. And so if a general plan goes out to the public and is not ratified, and that has happened in some communities, hasn't happened on any of the general plans that we've worked on, but in some communities that happens, and basically state law says you have to keep trying. So there's some refined language that specifies how you have to keep trying, but in essence, it says you have to go back to the public, figure out what is it that, that the public is wanting revised, make those revisions, and then bring it back to the public. And they basically say you have to keep trying until it gets approved. So you can't say that we tried and, oh well. You have to make adjustments and then bring the plan forward. And some communities have, it's taken a couple times for them to go through that process, but that, is obviously not the goal here. And it's also, that can take additional dollars for a community to either continue to refine the plan or to support an election. So, of course, as part of our effort, we try to make sure we understand whatever issue might be and tackle those. And I would also add that, to your point, that is why we like to keep that time frame between when council approves the plan to when the election is, to that minimum 120 days. Because if we were to say, oh, well, let's just, get it done early and we'll give ourselves 300 days, well, then that means we don't have the ability to go back in and adjust the plan if something happened in the community that caused a need to make a refinement. So right now we've taken ourselves to that kind of threshold of that 120-day window with a little bit of flexibility, but not much, in order to make sure that we can be as responsive as possible to what's going on in the city today, but leave ourselves ability to obviously make that ballot.
So the existing plan would stay in full force and effect during that retry, second go-around, or whatever
Correct.
it takes?
Correct.
Okay. Considering that plan is 10 years old and we've marched away from it in our growth, that would not be a good thing to have to continue to work with an old plan at the rate that we're growing and expanding. The new plan identifies the newer needs and the newer concerns of a community that's always changing its demographics. New people coming in all the time.
Yes, we would agree with you there.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Matt, I had a couple. I think there's a little bit of a misconception that I've noticed on social media and in messages or calls and things like that I've received as it relates to this is we look at the general plan and we look at the map, and I don't know if we can pull one of the overall, it doesn't really matter which one of the overall maps up. But this is a great one. It really shows this huge area, whereas the city of Maricopa only occupies 20–30% of this area that's shown. And I think there's a misconception that's out there that this is, we're trying to force it down some, the people of specifically Hidden Valley, Thunderbird Farms, we're trying to force the city of Maricopa down their throats, and that's not it. But it's just kind of a general overview. But I think what would help, in some of these maps, and there's numerous maps throughout the whole document, is more of a focus on, or maybe an enlarged focus on the city of Maricopa and the general plan as it really, conforms to the city itself. Maybe that's part of this document. Maybe it's a website that people can zoom in, zoom out. They can get the full effect, but this map that's up right now is a great example. You really can't get the detail of what's happening within the city limits in this document. And I think kind of throughout the whole, however many pages, I forget what, this happens quite a few times.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Good observation, and yes, if for everyone in the audience, now that I can get to our little pointer here, what the Chair is mentioning and what I tried to verbally mention is this is the municipal limits, basically, of the city of Maricopa. But this whole area is the planning boundary of someone else is drawing there. What I wanted to emphasize twofold based off your comments, Chair, is that in response to your suggestion, we will be making a digital plan of this. So one of the things is this is a static PDF, and after this plan is approved, then we can convert it to a digital plan, and we'll be able to zoom in and out of this map to get into the whatever area that a resident may want to see in greater detail, and they'll see it within the context of the plan itself. So they can pan around, go read a goal, come back to it. So I think you're spot on. We would agree with you, and we were anticipating balancing that with this digital plan and the ability to zoom in and out. But the other thing that your point is important is that yes, all this area here, the Hidden Valley area, is all within or under the jurisdiction of Pinell County. And so it is a unique situation in that state statute is saying the city of Maricopa must identify where it might grow to, and it must plan that area. So we are going through those motions to identify that in the future, if the city were to grow, these are the areas that the city would be looking into. Now, we have a couple things to keep in mind. Pinell County is still the authority for these unincorporated areas. So their comprehensive plan is still the guiding document that would determine growth and development in this area. The other aspect is that we want to make sure that we recognize this plan has to be updated every 10 years. And so we don't have to have the vision for every nook and cranny of the overall planning area for this general plan, because the city didn't even get out of its current municipal limits over this last 10-year cycle. And so yes, there might be growth that, because we have to be contiguous, there might be growth that happens, but it's gonna take a long time for the city to annex all of this area and then go through additional planning processes. So we wanted to be very delicate with those residents and not get into a very elaborate planning effort down in this area with those residents, because they're ultimately still under the purview of the county. And so the city, even if we were to go down there and create the best plan we can, for those residents, they would still be dependent on the county to make land use decisions. And so this plan is to show a starting point, a conceptual idea of how development may occur down in that area. But over the next development cycles, we would expect that the larger planning area would continue to evolve through this same update process.
Very good, thank you. The only thing I would like to add to that is in the overall document, there were some things that kind of tie the area of Hidden Valley and Thunderbird Farms back to the city, be it you know, possibly fire stations, police stations, schools, things like that, that are noted within the city boundaries. But you know, if the city of Maricopa or the Maricopa School District is going to be operating the schools in Hidden Valley, then maybe some of those should be shown as well. It's just kind of a housekeeping thing that.
And we would like to give as much detail as possible on that, but because there was different from a school district standpoint and from fire district standpoint, there was variability there about where future locations might be. We opted for more detail within the municipal limits, and then the planning area was more open-ended to be reactive, or I shouldn't even say reactive, to provide flexibility for the different timing of development. So we weren't confident in the data we had to provide that level of detail in the larger planning area.
Okay, that explains it. The last one is, we have a pretty good list of goals for this next planning cycle. What happens if we don't meet those goals? If we fall short?
So, you know, that I think the takeaway here of the general plan is that it's a living document, if you will. It you know, with the benefit of having a foundational document, whoops, going the wrong way. With the benefit of this document getting updated every 10 years, if a goal doesn't get completely accomplished, then it either continues forward in the next update or it gets refined because we ask ourselves, well, why weren't we able to achieve this goal? Did the vision change, or was there a roadblock to it? And so that, I would say, is one of the outcomes of this update effort. Is one of the first things we did with our advisory committee is we gave them all the goals in the current general plan and said, what ones do you think should be kept, removed, or revised? And that's a quick gut check of what do we think we accomplished over the last 10 years, what do we still need to work on, and what have we just moved away from? And so we went through that update effort, but one of the things that I would emphasize why I want to come to this implementation work or schedule is that this is a starting point of how we can hopefully ensure that those goals don't get left behind, that all of these action items were suggested because we thought they moved the needle the most in terms of alignment with the goals that are outlined within the plan. So, you know, if I were to, not that anybody can read it from back there, but this specific one here under land use and growth, it says update the zoning and subdivision ordinance to be consistent with the implementation of the general plan. And so throughout the general plan, we have goals and policies that say, you know, like we talked about housing, make sure that we have a spectrum of housing. And so then that would mean get into the zoning code and make sure that our zoning districts allow for that. Look at the zoning map and make sure that we have a zoning map that identifies area for large lot residential just as much as single family or multifamily. So, so there's a lot of things in this implementation that I would emphasize is used to try and achieve or accomplish those goals.
And I'm glad you brought up housing. As you know, it's one of those areas that's near to me. And you know, as a commission, we see a lot of these housing developments that come through, and we're not seeing necessarily that diversity in housing product. And it's what the landowners and the developers are coming through with, and having some type of tool to push back and say, no, we can't just have, you know, small lot developments. We have to have some diversity here. And I don't know that we're necessarily seeing some of that right now, and so that's kind of that's backing into where my question started from.
Yeah, thank you for making a very strong point in terms of back to our comment about This update brings in feedback that can be very valuable to the next 10 years, and we're not relying on language from 10 years ago to champion that same idea.
Very good.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Yocum.
I was around back in 2015 when we went through this process. I was on the committee which helped to put it together. And there's no question we fell short on some of the expectations and plans in that plan. There's no question it's going to happen with this plan also. I think we have to be aware of that. What are they going to be? When are they going to be? And why? Nobody has any idea, but nothing is going to be perfect. We have to prepare for that. I think we will address those challenges as we continue to work under this plan. But in 2035, when we do our next plan, we're going to take a look at what we did not accomplish this time around. I don't know if I'm going to be here then or not, but I think what we have to keep in mind that it's a living document and it is subject to change as we go along. Having the experience I did, I'm very confident that the product we are presenting tonight is the one we want to live with.
Well said. Thank you.
Any other comments? Mr. Robinson.
Matt, back to the additional planning area outside of municipal boundaries. How is that area determined? Who determines where that starts and stops?
Yeah, it actually, within state statute, it specifies that every general plan must consider a planning area, but it does not provide any language of how those planning areas are determined. And so the reality is that municipalities within any particular county most often coordinate amongst themselves to identify common boundaries of those planning areas. And that's really how that boundary is determined. So there isn't a very rigorous or formal process. It's more of identifying what areas might make the most sense for a community to be able to meet with infrastructure and those types of things. And so in some parts of certain counties, where there's a lot of communities, there's very hard lines of planning areas, and there's not much room for adjustment because you're kind of landlocked. And in Maricopa County's experience, the planning process had to kind of go leapfrog the Indian community to round out that planning area.
Yeah, I was, looking at this particular map. People say we're landlocked. We are to some extent. We get native communities north and south of us. We've got state land to the east, and then we get up against Casa Grande boundaries. To the west, I'm assuming we're up against probably federal BLM land out there, I would imagine. So those are some of the natural boundaries that we've been confined with.
Correct.
And to the south, we've got Tohono O'odham on the other side of Interstate 8. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Very good. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
With that, I'll go to the public for comments. And I'll remind everyone, I do have 3 speaker cards. Please limit your speaking time to 3 minutes or less, so we get time for everybody to say what they need to say. And with that, we'll start off with Tina Dugan.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Tina Dugan. I know, shocker. I've lived here for many years, and I appreciate the amount of work that's gone into this plan. This includes what our community wants, including job creation, commercial growth, and a balanced city. I do want to offer a few thoughts that I believe could strengthen this plan. And as I read this, one of my big concerns is that goals from one area can cancel out goals from another area. First, I would encourage clearer alignment between growth and infrastructure. This plan acknowledges increasing traffic and the need for improvements, but I think it would benefit from stronger language that prioritizes infrastructure timing alongside development, not after it. Second, on economic development, there's a strong goal of bringing in jobs, which I fully support. I would just suggest adding more clarity about how that will be achieved, whether through targeted industries, partnerships, or specific strategies, so it becomes more than just a goal. Third, the plan leads heavily on mixed use and village center concepts. I think those are great ideas, but it may help to include some flexibility or phasing language to ensure these concepts are implemented in a way that reflects real market demand and doesn't leave partially developed areas as we've seen before. And finally, I would encourage continued emphasis on resource planning, especially water, and long-term sustainability, as growth projections are significant. I understand that a general plan is a guiding document and not meant to get into full implementation details, but I do think where possible, adding a little more clarity around how some of these goals connect to future decision-making would help ensure this vision translates into reality. I would like to just point out two other things. A Google web search for advancing Maricopa, the very first thing that comes up leads you to the new website with a page not found error. And I'm curious if the public can view comments that were made during this process. I did not find them. I'd especially like to view those from other entities. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tina. The next one I have is Ron Andrami. Sorry, Ron.
Thank you, Planning and Zoning Board, for this opportunity to talk about the general plan and the CIP. While the 427 pages are quite robust with spending details, there is an absence of revenue expectation or timeframes as to when these results can be expected. For example, one of the biggest challenges facing the city is meaningful local jobs. The plan states, and I quote, "Job creation and business development, Maricopa's well-educated workforce and environment for economic growth makes our community attractive to employers that gives them a platform to grow from. Bringing quality jobs to the city will improve economic opportunities for residents and lift up the entire community." Sounds great. The budget is $16 million for land acquisition. Okay, how many jobs can we expect by when? The general plan is full of great rhetoric, but light on specific results and timeframes. As multiple projects compete for funds, how can a meaningful comparison be accomplished in the absence of financial results and timeframes? How can true progress be measured if there are no financial goals or timeframes? I also have a major concern regarding the traffic light at Casablanca and State Route 347. While I appreciate there are many challenges in getting this light removed, there is a total absence of any action in the general plan. If we take the three worst intersections in Maricopa, add up the number of accidents at each of these intersections, that number is still lower than the number of accidents at Casablanca. We talk a lot about public safety, so I have to believe this is one that's at the top of the list. Also, as you can see from the Maricopa corridor concept maps that I've distributed, Green Road Loop intersects State Route 347 south of Casablanca. That means all the new housing projected for south of Maricopa, as well as projects on the State Route 238, including large-scale master plan communities like Sunrise Ranch and Moonlight Ridge, as well as major multifamily projects like West Maricopa Village, will all funnel onto Green Loop, connect with State Route 347, then bam, hit the traffic light at Casablanca. A bigger traffic disaster in the making. I respectfully request that a plan be included to eliminate the traffic light at Casablanca. Over the past 4 years, comparable challenges have been overcome in getting State Route 347 widened and the lights removed at cement plant and rigs. I believe we can do it again. I also think it's important that every goal have a quantifiable, measurable benefit expectation and the expected time frame to completion. In this way, we have a true yardstick to measure our results. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Ron. The last card that I have is Brittany Pisola.
Good evening. I've lived in Maricopa for 12 and a half years, so when I moved here, there was 40,000 residents, and we have more than doubled. Maybe it was less than 40,000. And I'm kind of worried about where we're going because the infrastructure and the sorry, I'm lost for words. The consumer enterprises that we have do not support the number of houses we have. The roads out towards Tortosa and all those new housing developments out in Sorrento and past there are one-way streets and make it very difficult and very long commutes into town. There is no grocery store or gas stations out there, nothing to support them. They are an island, and I didn't really see any of this addressed in the plan, although I did have trouble with that because I didn't have any information about this plan until 3 days before the meeting at the library. And it was on a little tiny sign on the desk at the library, and it didn't even have a time. This general plan was advertised very poorly. I subscribed to the emails for these meetings because I come often. This was not mentioned. The plan at the library was not mentioned. I tried to get on the broadcast there, and I wasn't able to because of technical difficulties. I couldn't come in person. I had a sick kid. And I was never able to find it on the YouTube channel to review it later. I tried to read the plan. I don't have time to read 400 pages. And the language wasn't easy to understand as well. This is not very accessible to the public, even to a person that has a degree and who took a city planning course in college. This was a very difficult plan for me to understand. Like many have said on social media, we don't want to become a mini Phoenix. We don't want to expand out past where we are now. We like our small town feel. That's part of the reason why me and many of my friends have lived here. And I hope that's taken into consideration and that we're not going to incorporate Hidden Valley and Thunderbird Farms. They want to be their own communities. They don't want to be part of Maricopa. Some things I didn't see in there was speed limits and how to protect our youth and give them more opportunities. In the past year alone, there have been double the number of accidents in the past 6 years previous of kids being hit, especially on Porter in that area. And I didn't see anything about that. I also didn't see much about what we're doing for youth and seniors to give them opportunities to participate in the, there's not a whole lot of youth programs outside of the few youth programs at the library and the sports programs. That's a very small part of our population for the youth that aren't being addressed. The others aren't being addressed. And there's not much for seniors to do as well. I don't know, I just don't feel like this is a very comprehensive plan and that we're not going in the right direction that we need to be. And that's just my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak? Go ahead. Oh, you sure? Ladies first, James.
Thank
Please
you,
state-
Chair.
please state your name
I'm
for the
Susan
record.
Bonsante.
Sorry.
I own property here in Maricopa and also out in Hidden Valley and Thunderbird Farms. Many of you have had conversations with me on social media, so you probably know me. I wanted to make sure, because there is a bit of a lack of transparency with this plan. The current map boundaries have been, the one that's being proposed is the same one that was on the table, it looks like, for the last 10 years. It's hard to believe there was a point made that the county has their comprehensive plan and the city of Maricopa has their general plan, and as if the two don't speak. But that would be impossible to believe when you consider the county just basically learned that there's approximately 46 subdivisions already approved between 1997 and approximately 2005. Those are prepared to put shovels in the ground at any point in time. Now, granted, services have to come to meet that as well. But with that brings approximately 240,000 more residents. With the current map boundary, that would all be annexed into the city of Maricopa. It's no secret that the people of Hidden Valley and Thunderbird Farms do not wish to be incorporated into the city of Maricopa. And I understand the conversation that this is a plan and we have to show something, but I do believe it's been the goal of Maricopa. I've sat in at meetings where the city of Maricopa has said that they want to be the largest city in the state. State boundaries, state trust land can be bought. These big developers are proving that. So I'm speaking on behalf of the people who don't have a say and don't have a vote. I also own property and I'm currently living out in that area. I see all the changes and all the destruction of the rural land out there. And I look at the map and there's little slivers that Maricopa is showing that they would retain and allow to remain rural. But I just think that the transparency for the community needs to be how big this will actually be, and the fact that these subdivisions are already approved. And Maricopa knows that. The county didn't know that. We had to help them develop a map so that they could identify these. But there have been people in place in the city and the county, and I'm sure that those conversations have taken place. So that's really all I wanted to do, was to make sure everybody knew that.
Thank you. Mr. Singleton.
Commissioners, first off, I want to thank you for allowing me to speak. Some of you I've sat directly next to up on the dais. I've served on this commission for 3 years, most recently as chair, and over the past couple of months, I've put together a 32-page written document of feedback on this general plan. I sent it to every council member, several of the commissioners, as well as pretty much all department heads across the city, and I believe my feedback was given to the presenters today. This plan that was presented today has real strength: the industrial triangle, the village center framework, and the hospital land sale, along with SR 347 being on ADOT's 5-year plan now. Those are meaningful foundations, and this commission deserves credit for the work that kind of got us here. My ask is that you recommend it with a push to go further. I know this is a general plan, but the difference between a plan that manages growth and a plan that shapes a destination city is specificity. The cities that made that jump stopped describing what they hoped to become and started making binding commitments about what they were going to build and when. They named their downtown. They adopted a brand. Arizona state law requires an annual report on general plan progress, and that's a good baseline. However, it's not really made publicly available, and I think that it should. Maricopa has 3 assets no other Arizona city holds at the same time. We have sovereign tribal nations as neighbors, a national caliber agri-tech research cluster, and roughly 200 square miles of room to build the city it wants to be, rather than retrofit what it inherited. I'm asking that the final plan be more specific on 5 things: a designated downtown with a location and binding design standards, a city identity that is actually impossible for anyone else to claim, a measurable performance framework that city council reports on publicly, and housing diversity that goes beyond single family, and a medical district plan that treats the area by Copper Sky as the beginning of a strategy, not the end of one. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak? Please.
Good evening. My name is Nicholas Sindreski. Thank you for everyone being here, especially those in the audience. I recognize some people from the Leadership Academy. So good to see some familiar faces. I just want to take a quick moment to kind of just highlight some important things that I think is important to consider for Maricopa. One of those things I think is sustainability. I know that there are a lot. One of the interesting things about Maricopa, I guess I would say, is that there's a lot of new policies that were implemented for the way that buildings are being designed today that are for newer communities that was hard to do back then for older communities, because those policies and procedures were in place. But I think that there should be some sort of mechanism to be able to go back, take some money, and revisit older parts of Maricopa and try to bring them up the code. I know that's kind of hard to do because they're already built, but are there just more ways to have them incorporate more sustainable design, if that's all feasible, to kind of bring Maricopa up the standard? That way, all of Maricopa gets that treatment. It's not just the newer residential communities or commercial areas. Also, another thing, too, is just making Maricopa a more walkable city. I think that's very important. Some individuals have highlighted the pedestrian accidents that have been happening as of recently. I know some people think that part of that solution might be reducing speed limits. I personally just think it's that Maricopa is not a very walkable city. When you're driving through Maricopa, the last thing you expect is a pedestrian. That's just because you don't really see a whole lot of pedestrians in Maricopa compared to other parts of Arizona. Like, I attend ASU. When I'm driving by the Tempe campus, I'm always looking for pedestrians because there's always students walking around. That's just a very common thing. That's not very common here in Maricopa because it's not a very pedestrian-esque city. It's more car-centric. I think that's one of Maricopa's flaws, is that it's kind of like more of a Phoenix, where it's very car-centric, and that's just poor city planning, in my opinion. But at the same time, I don't think the people back then, when Maricopa was first incorporated, knew Maricopa was going to expand this big with that many people, so I can't blame them for that. But I think that there are better ways to redesign Maricopa in some aspects to try to make it more walkable, and that just includes better pedestrian paths, better bike paths, and things like that. Just to make it more of a walkable city. It shouldn't be very car-centric. Everything should be easily accessible, especially as you're going towards the future. And another thing, too, I would like to see is the incorporation of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. That's something that more so that cities are adopting. But I think that'd be really cool that a small town like Maricopa, that isn't on the scale of like Phoenix or other cities, especially in California with Los Angeles, but to adopt something like the UN Sustainable Development Goals, that's something that was really great set up by the UN. I think that'd be a really cool thing to incorporate. So just some quick thoughts I wanted to share. Thank you, guys.
Good. Thank you. Anybody else like to speak? Seeing none, I will close the public comment portion.
Mr.
of this.
Chairman, if
Yes,
I
sir.
might interject, that's some great feedback that we received from folks in the audience there. Maybe we give Matthew a chance to respond.
I was just going to turn it back over to him.
Perfect.
All good. Got to keep me in line. We're good. Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you to those that spoke. We put a lot of effort into these planning documents, and so it does mean a lot to us to hear residents have not only just glanced at this, but read the plan cover to cover and put great thought into it. There was a few comments that were shared that I did want to maybe see if I could clarify to help give some more detailed understanding about how the general plan is used and then how it influences other efforts within the city. The first thing I wanted to mention, and I apologize, I'll try to address as many of the comments that were mentioned, but I might not get every specific point. The first thing I want to mention is a comment about goals cancel other goals out. That is absolutely not the case in terms of the general plan. Yes, we do not prioritize one goal or one policy over the other, but that's intentional within a general plan because we have decision makers. We have the Planning Commission, we have council, and these bodies need to have some flexibility to understand situations and make near-term decisions that are in alignment with long-term decisions, as I mentioned before. And so that will happen when we have cases that come before you, where there will be certain goals within the general plan that might, in specific situations, counteract each other. And through deliberations and through discussion in meetings like this, the city will have the ability to understand what is it that we need to hold more important in this particular application above something else. So we're not in a position to say one goal is more important than the other. As we stand here today, it's going to need to be decided on a case-by-case basis. But what the general plan does do is identify what were those primary themes or conditions that residents held high, and those often are ones that we would convey are things that might have a higher priority level than some of the other goals or policies. So I did want to speak to that. When it comes to stronger language about commitments to dollars, to timing, to level of detail, we would love to put more specifics within the general plan. However, in the development of this, we don't have the budget or the time to go in and refine all of that level of detail. There was comments shared about having more detail about what our downtown might look like and where it would be. We asked the public through this process, do you want a downtown? And the public came back and said, we like the idea of multiple village centers taking on different character areas. And so we identified that those village centers need to have their own discussions about what is the character that is most appropriate for that area. And the general plan just didn't have the number of meetings, the special specific meetings that one would conduct to get to that level of detail. And so what typically happens and what we list out in our implementation table is, I think, a lot of what was discussed, and that's the fantastic part about some of the comments we heard is residents already thinking about what's next, okay? We got a general plan that has a general guideline, but I want more detail, and we would agree with you. And we offer that the CIP that the city manages is one area that has detail. The zoning code I mentioned is another. We have a redevelopment plan that the city went through for specific parts of the community. And those area plans are exactly what could be done for these village centers. We also talk about the updating the parks, trails, and open space master plan. That plan hasn't been updated in many years and can also be utilized to update programs for seniors, for youth. And that's where you can get in and understand from Parks and Rec, what do they offer right now? What is the participation in those? I mean, there is a lot of analysis that would go into that in order to get the detail to then have very specific plans. And so we would use this sheet, and I would emphasize that a lot of the comments relative to a traffic light, we have the transportation master plan that is being worked on right now. I would encourage residents to be part of that process to identify the Green Road Loop is noted in the general plan, but further analyzed in that master plan. And so those comments that were shared can be explored in that. The document being more user-friendly. That was something we heard out of the 60-day review process is, man, this is a long document. How much time do you think I have? And so we heard that and said, we'll go make an executive summary. And so now the document has an executive summary, and we even put a table in that executive summary of the topics that were most discussed through outreach and the specific goals and policies one could go to that address that topic. So it's a Cliff Notes cheat sheet that someone can say, you know, Matt, I love your plan. I can tell you guys put a lot of effort in, but I'm just focused on this. Where can I go find that? You go to that table, and it can skip you right to information from that. As far as getting more information about the feedback that we received through this process, if you go to the project website, maricopagp.com, that site has not only the draft plan that we're talking about tonight, but it has our public outreach summary as well. And so that document is a long one as well, because it has every effort that we did as far as outreach, and every comment we received is documented in that report. That report will get updated as part of this planning commission process. So any of the material that residents submitted as part of this process will then get added to that document, and then council will have the benefit of seeing all of it. And our goal from this was to be as transparent as possible. And so that's why that document is so long, is that it doesn't have the survey results. It has every survey and what every resident noted. I think with that, I'll just try and keep my comments succinct, is that I really respect residents' desire for more detail. And we're ready and willing to explore if it's appropriate to put that detail in the plan. But we've been part of plans where detail has been put in it, and then when the decision process comes and there's money attached to it or a timing, that becomes problematic. And so we don't want to paint ourselves into a corner and say something that with great detail and then find out as we get into the process that we can't necessarily meet that expectation that was put in the general plan. So that given that it's ratified every 10 years, we try to set that foundational direction, try to make those policies that align with the comments. But then if there is something that says, now this is where we need detail, it's this action item that can really put the city on notice and what residents can hold up. When the plan is hopefully ultimately ratified, then residents can hold this implementation plan together and say, okay, council, we had all these lofty goals and policies, and these are the action items that we think need to get funded and move forward in order to accomplish these. And so we were trying to listen very diligently to balance and thread that we're trying to do the best service to the city and meet the needs of statute, but also respect the desire to have detail. And so we tried to build that detail in where it is most appropriate in terms of this table. With that, Chair, I'll pause and just see if there's any follow-up.
Very good. Thank you, Matt. Commissioner Robertson.
Thanks again, Matt, and I appreciate the comments from the public. Very important. Couple concerns. First, Matt, could you walk us through what the actual annexation process would be with the map and the model of our community and our expanded planning area? And number two, this is a public hearing where we've asked people to come and give their comments. But yet earlier you said, if there's any changes, you got to have the specific language tonight. That's not going to happen, my friend. We're not in a position to write that language. There's nobody here, staff, that can write that language and hand it to you tonight. So that's a real concern. I feel painted into a corner, to be honest with you, that I'm supposed to recommend or not recommend tonight, but yet I hear concerns from the audience out there that is real. And we brought them here for that purpose of a public hearing. But then to be told, we got to have the language tonight. That's not going to happen. So if you would just go ahead and tell us about what the annexation process is and hopefully relieve some fears.
So, well, thank you for the reminder on the annexation, because that is important, that state law dictates how the annexation process occurs. And so as far as, you know, what we talked about before is this is the municipal limits of the community. State law then mandates that for an annexation process, you must be contiguous to your municipal limits. And so in order for that to happen, we come around the Ak-Chin community in terms of where the current boundary of the municipal limits are and how a particular annexation might evolve into the larger planning area. That aside, in terms of just the physical mechanics of being contiguous, and some other conditions about the shape and size of the area that's being annexed. Ultimately, the property owners within that area that is under consideration have a say in whether they're going to be annexed or not. So it's not to just say that a community can come in and say, we're going to annex you, and then start that process. The residents of that area, the property owners of that area also have a say on whether they are interested in being annexed. So it's, yes, it is not, in terms of the county managing development within the planning area, they absolutely are the decision maker. If there is an amendment to their comprehensive plan for the unincorporated areas, that amendment is shared with staff at the city of Maricopa. Staff then has the ability to make a comment to the county and say, we support that change or we don't support that change. And there was a project, an energy project in this planning area that staff was not in favor of, and the county respectfully said, thank you for your feedback, but we're going to go the other way. And that was their prerogative, and that's the balancing act we're trying to respect with residents in that area, is that we hear them. We try to incorporate a number of their comments through this process, even though they're not ultimately residents and going to be voting on this plan. We were sensitive to their input, but at the same time trying to balance expectation so that we don't give them an impression that that the city has more say over development in their area than they currently do. And the other aspect, in terms of the comments tonight, I apologize if my comments made you feel like you were painted into a corner. We have a couple options in front of us in order to account for any of the feedback that we might feel is prudent. But what I would emphasize is that the takeaway is that when we bring something to council for their decision, we must have the language in alignment with what the Planning Commission requests. So if we're not in a position for specific language, we can get legal advice on this as well, but it is acceptable to say that we're moving this plan forward, but we would strongly recommend that council consider in their work session, whatever aspect that you heard tonight you think needs to have more consideration. And that's why we built in this work session with council, was to give us one more bite at the apple in terms of making any more refinements. And so I wouldn't want to emphasize that commission has to make a decision that you're not ready for, but I would emphasize that we have the ability to take your input and incorporate it within this process, given the parameters that we have.
Thank you. Back to the annexation for a minute. The continuance, the connection between the city and the outlying areas, I understand that, and I knew the answer ahead of time, but we had the question arise. So just to reiterate, the people in those outlying areas in our expanded planning area, they are involved and get a say in the process of annexation if and when it ever came.
Correct.
Thank you.
The only thing I would like to just add to that, there are some pre-development agreements that are already in place that have already allocated annexation if and when it does occur. So the subdivisions, for example.
A great point, and I would emphasize that the ownership of that right is a landowner for those areas. It's not taking in additional lands outside of those projects.
Correct. Any other questions for Matt? Good. Thank you. With that, I'll bring it back to the dais for any additional discussion. Any recommendations back to staff, or open for a motion?
I do have one point. He kind of referred to legal. Do you have anything to shed before we make a motion that it will have to be included within the motion to leave room for what he was suggesting the council would need to do?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Thomas, I think what Matt's referring to is if you're going to make specific changes to goal 1, we'd have to go over those in detail right now, because he wants to present to council at the next workshop the exact item that was approved by this commission or recommended for approval by the commission. If you wanted to direct staff and Matt, the consultant, to prepare a summary with all of the recommendations or the proposed changes that were presented tonight by the public, you could do that, direct him to do that, and that could be presented at the council workshop May 19th. That would be in addition to a motion to approve the general plan as presented.
Can we have it as vague as that?
I think that's, well, yes, number one, because you'd be approving the general plan, and then you're directing staff and the consultant to prepare a summary of all the comments that were raised by the public tonight at the public hearing.
Okay, thank you.
So I guess my final question is, does that make the motion messy? Or can we just make the motion with the understanding that every comment that came up tonight will be presented in the workshop? That's my concern.
If that is the direction from the commission, I think staff would hear you loud and clear. I don't think the motion is going to be messy because the motion is still going to be recommending approval of the general plan.
Thank you. Any other questions or discussion? Commissioner Robertson.
Thanks for that clarification, because that makes me feel a little bit more at ease, because that's important. There was a lot of, when you look at James's document alone, that's a considerable document with a lot of good stuff in it. There's no way we can consider that tonight. Tina brought up, Ms. Dugan brought up a missing element about public safety expansion. Highway consideration outside of our jurisdiction be included. Those are going to be some legal challenges for that even to be considered. I don't see any way for us to make a recommendation other than for staff to ask staff to consider what they heard tonight and continue to work forward. As vague as that is, that's all I've got.
Do we need a motion to assure that that's going to occur?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Yocum, I think staff's heard you loud and clear of the direction of documenting the comments from tonight and ensuring that it is included at the May 19th council workshop.
Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Thomas.
I'll move that this council approve the Advanced Maricopa 2026 General Plan Update.
I'll second.
Do we need to add any direction to that?
You can ask for further discussion.
I just want to make sure before we.
No, I'm good.
Good, very good. Any discussions on that? Let's do a roll call vote.
Yes.
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 Chairman Cloak.
Yes.
Commissioner Robertson
No.
and Commissioner Rowe.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. It passes.
5-1, passes. Very good. That item passed. Thank you, everyone. Reports from the commission and/or staff.
Just a quick update for you this evening, Chairman, members of the commission. We're looking at having one meeting in May 11th for next month. Second meeting falls in the Labor Day weekend, so we're going to try and go the first month, or the first meeting, which will be May 11th. Just in all honesty, we've got one item that's tracking for that meeting right now, so it is kind of iffy. We'll know in the next week or so whether they meet the noticing deadlines to meet that. So as soon as I have confirmation one way or the other, I'll let all of y'all know, and we'll post something on the city website. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my update, and I'll turn it back over to you, sir.
Very good, thank you. I don't believe we need to go to executive session. With that, I'll take a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 We are adjourned. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight.